So this week, our entire team sat down at our office there with CREB's Chief Economist, Anne-Marie Lurie, for 90 minutes. So, a huge benefit that we have, and thus you have, with us able to bring this to you is just due to our top performing, status in Canada, and obviously just having exceptional leadership arranging amazing value meetings like this. So this one does dig deeper than a normal monthly market report. Now, I'm sure that you may have been excited to sit through a 90-minute video about the economy, but I've unfortunately chosen to summarize this for you rather than just data dump. So now if you have trouble sleeping, I genuinely encourage you to reach out and we can arrange that privately. But what I actually want to do today is just give you the real takeaways, the things that went deeper, like migration patterns, employment data, what's actually driving the divergence in this market, and what it all means for you, whether you're buying, selling, or investing in Calgary right now. My name is Derek Bryer, licensed real estate advisor here in Calgary with the Justin Haver Real Estate team at EXP. And before real estate, I spent over 20 years in residential construction and exterior building product sales. So, I look at markets the same way I look at houses. I want to know what's underneath. And before we dive in, if you do find this useful, just please hit subscribe. I make these videos on a regular basis so that you have access to, the same information that's usually only in the room. And that's the whole point. So let's dig in. Firstly, you've got inflation, interest rates, and energy prices. So first, the macro context, because everything else flows from here. Interest rates, I know everyone wants to talk about interest rates. The short answer from someone who actually studies this full time, flat through 2026. The Bank of Canada isn't expected to make significant moves this year. Inflation exists, but it's concentrated in energy. It doesn't broaden meaningfully into food and transport. The rate environment stays roughly where it is. So we've got modest changes, could come in 2027, but the dramatic rate cut scenario that a lot of buyers have been, just holding out for, it's not the base case right now. So what this means for you is that if you've been waiting for rates to drop before you buy, the data suggests that you may be waiting, for something that just isn't coming on the time frame that you were hoping for. Just something to consider there. So next we've got the national housing market comparison. Okay, this one I love because it puts everything in context immediately. There is no national housing market. There never really was. Canada is just too large and dynamic for that. And when you see this slide, Calgary sitting at 6% below its 10-year sales average, while Toronto is 41% below, and Vancouver sitting at 34% below, it just stops being a talking point and starts being genuinely obvious. Calgary employment is up 4.2% year to date, and Toronto and Vancouver are both negative. So, that's the whole story in two numbers. Everything else is detail, right? So what this means is that when someone tells you the Canadian housing market is struggling, just nod politely, then remember that Calgary is a very different conversation. So, if you're watching this from Ontario or BC, hit subscribe. There's a lot more in this video that's going to matter for you specifically. Next, we've got demand slowing more than expected. So here's where the chief economist was refreshingly honest. Demand has slowed more than they forecast. So the original 2026 call was sales down about 2%. So year to date through May, we're tracking at minus 12. So that is a meaningful miss. But here's where the nuance that the headline number completely buries. Detached and semi-detached homes down 4%. Apartments down 28%. So when you see Calgary sales down 12% in a headline, what that headline is not telling you is that the 12% is not evenly distributed, not even close. So we're going to come back to this theme a few times because it really is probably the most important thing to understand about this market right now. Different product types, completely different stories. So next, we've got Alberta has the highest population growth in the country. So this slide, it just explains why the market slowed and why it isn't actually a crisis. So in 2024, Alberta received just under 130,000 international migrants, and 2025, just over 19,000. So that is an 85% drop in 1 year. Just federal policy changes, the end of the remote work wave, and a return to job-based relocation all hit simultaneously. So next you've got interprovincial migration, people moving here from other provinces, also dropped 41%. But, and this is the important part, Alberta still leads the entire country in population growth. So 1.2% in 2025. Canada as a whole was negative 0.25%. Okay, but we didn't stop growing. We just went from extraordinary back to strong, which is a very different problem from what Toronto and Vancouver are dealing with right now. And this is a good moment to say everything in this video is based on the best available data as of mid-2026. There's no crystal ball here. Nobody has one. Not CREB's chief economist, not me, not the economists at the big banks. Forecasts are informed views on where the current data is pointing, not guarantees. Okay, so just use this to make better decisions, not as a substitute for advice specific to your own situation, which obviously is exactly why we're here for, why I'm here. So again, link is in the description. So next we've got the new home supply. So here's the supply side of the story, and it does explain a lot. Calgary ran 3 consecutive years of record housing starts, record. And, a lot of what got started 2-3 years ago is now finishing and arriving on the market at exactly the moment the demand has cooled, right? So right now, there are approximately 16,000 apartment units under construction in the city. So 65% of those are purpose-built rental properties. So there are another 14,000 pre-construction units in the pipeline that haven't even broken ground yet, no shovels. So overall starts are down 33% year to date. The industry is just pumping the brakes as expected, but the pipeline from the last 3 years is still delivering. Okay, so what this means is that if you're buying new construction, particularly in the north or northeast, you do have real negotiating power right now. Builders are motivated, and if you're selling resale in those same areas, you are now competing against those builders who have obviously deep pockets and are motivated to move these. So you need to price accordingly. Next, we've got rising vacancy rates. So condo investors, this one's for you. Stay with me, but you may want to sit down for this, okay? So vacancy rates are rising. The Northwest at 6%, inner city at 5.4%. At the same time, there are nearly 6,500 condos and almost 11,000 rental units under construction simultaneously. And net migration for all of 2026 is forecast at just over 14,000 people. So you don't need an economics degree to see the math there, right? And the problem. Rents are softening. Institutional landlords are offering incentives that effectively reduce net rents without changing the headline number. And this makes renting more attractive, which does reduce demand for investment condos, which is why the apartment sales to new listings ratio is sitting at 42% right now. So what this means is that if you bought a condo as an investment expecting strong rental income and near-term appreciation, your situation is just more complicated than it was 12 months ago. Not panic, just honesty. Now, if you're looking at buying a condo to live in for the foreseeable future, completely different conversation. So next, we've got unsold apartment and townhome inventory and the map. So the Zonda map shows exactly where the unsold new construction inventory is piling up geographically. The outer south has 1,219 unsold units, outer north 779, and it's not just Calgary. Airdrie has 251, Cochrane 108, Chestermere 169. So the oversupply is a metro area story, not just a city story. So what this means is that if you're shopping for a condo or townhome anywhere on this map, you are in a buyer's market, so you might as well use it. Next, we've got supply rising, shifting to balance. So the overall Calgary resale market is sitting right on the edge of balanced. Inventory up 8% from the 10-year average. Sales down 6%. Months of supply at 3.1 versus 3.2 historically, just right on the line. But, and I know I keep saying that average is masking an enormous variation underneath it, which brings us to the next few slides. So conditions varying by property type. And, I have gone through this and will again. So here's the practical breakdown. You've got detached, 2.4 months of supply. We're balanced. Semi-detached, 2.7 months of supply. Also balanced, and actually one of the stronger segments right now. You've got row homes, 3.3 months, more supply building out, but it's manageable. Then you've got apartments at 4.8 months. It's just a buyer's market there. And I know, we have established the detached versus apartment divergence a few times now. I do promise I'm going to stop hammering the same nail very shortly, but I just want you to have those specific numbers so that you know exactly which market that you're actually in. And I mean, if any of this is raising questions about your specific situation, again, it's exactly the conversation that I have with clients every day. Link is in the description, and just give me a call. And next, we've got balanced detached versus buyer's apartment. So this chart shows the actual divergence visually. Detached stable around 2.5 to 3 months of supply, as mentioned. Apartments climbing toward 5 and still going. So overall price growth for 2026 is forecast at negative 1%. Year to date, we're at negative 1.9. So almost entirely driven by the apartment segment, dragging the city average down. So detached prices in May still up slightly year over year. Apartments down 9%. Okay, nail put to rest, moving on. Next, we've got detached conditions varying by location. Now, this is where it gets genuinely useful because district and price band matter more than the citywide number right now by far. The headline, citywide detached benchmark in May at just over 748,000, down about 2.5% year over year. But look at the Northeast specifically. In the 700,000 to 800,000 price band, you've got 12 months of supply, 12, in the same price band. In the South, 2.1 months. Same city, completely different buying environment depending on where you are and what you're looking at. So we've got the Northeast and East. They're seeing the largest corrections here. Previous rapid gains, intense competition from new builds, and builder incentives all hitting at once. So what this means, buying detached in the Northeast between 6 and 8 right now, you do have real negotiating power. Use it. Selling in the same area at that price point, 12 months of supply, means buyers know exactly what kind of leverage they have, and you just have to price it for today's market, not 2024's market. Next, we've got the satellite communities, so quick pass through here, surrounding markets. A lot of you are either in these areas or considering them. So we've got Airdrie down 5.6%, about 3.2 months of supply, just feeling that new construction competition. Next, we've got Cochrane down 4.5%. It's 3.1 months, similar story. Chestermere, the softest satellite market right now at 5.3 months of supply, getting up there. And then we've got Okotoks, actually one of the higher markets in the whole region, at only 2.3 months of supply, down less than 1% year over year. So yeah, definitely holding up well. Next, we've got Strathmore and High River, both showing modest price growth, still representing genuine value relative to Calgary proper. Then you've got rural Rocky View County up 4.1% year over year. The acreage and luxury market out there is doing its own thing entirely. So I do serve all of these communities. If you want to know what a specific area looks like right now, then it's worth a few minute conversation. Next, we've got row prices stabilizing. So row homes, kind of the middle child of this market, more challenged than detached, but nowhere near the apartment situation. Citywide, your row benchmark just over 422,000, down about 6.5% year over year. Forecast for the full year is closer to negative 2%. So this is just suggesting stabilization from here. Then we've got the northeast row market at just under 300,000, 19.7 months of supply. I'm going to let that number sit there for a second. So nearly 20 months of supply. That's a segment that has essentially stalled. The south and southeast row market holding up considerably better. As always, just location does change everything. Okay, next we've got the condo prices. So condos, again, let's just be straight on this one. Citywide condo benchmark just over 300,000, down 9% year over year. Full year forecast negative 3.5%. So the chart just shows a downward trend that hasn't found its floor yet. Then you've got the West District condos. They're the one exception. So the tightest condo market in the city at 3.5 months of supply. Everywhere else is heavily buyer's market, ranging from 5 to nearly 8 months of supply in the Northeast. So, the chief economist was direct here. So a significant market shift for condos is not expected from 26 or 2027, given the structural oversupply and slowing migration. So, that's not really a soft landing message. That's this takes time to work itself through. Type of message. So what this means, again, buying a condo to live in, you do have real leverage and prices are more accessible than they've been in several years. Buying a condo as an investment, stress test your numbers carefully. Net rent after vacancy, fees, mortgage costs, your competition from institutional landlords who have lower cost structures than you do, and your appreciation timeline, given the supply pipeline still coming on the market. So, not a never buy a condo message, a go in with eyes open message. Next, we've got some job growth. So it's continuing here. So here's the foundation of why Calgary is fundamentally different from the markets that are genuinely struggling. So Calgary employment is up 4.2% year to date. The unemployment rate is still 7%, which sounds concerning until you understand why it's elevated. So people are moving here without pre-secured jobs. They're arriving, registering as job seekers, and finding work. So that's a completely different dynamic from 2015 through 2017 when unemployment rose because the energy sector was actively shedding jobs. So higher unemployment because people want to move here is a very different problem than higher unemployment because companies are cutting. So one of those is a sign of confidence, the other just isn't. Next is gains across most sectors. So the job growth is broad-based, not just one sector carrying the whole thing. Healthcare, social assistance leading the way with significant gains. Public admin is strong, so definitely a good public sector there. Then we've got manufacturing is positive as well, and professional services also positive. So construction is down, and this just makes sense given the pullback in housing starts. But the sectors that are growing tend to be higher paying. So higher paying jobs buy detached homes, which is obviously part of the reason why the detached market is holding up better than everything else. So next we've got the Alberta GDP and risks. So, Alberta is expected to lead the country in real GDP growth, both in 2025 and 2026. The narrative has shifted from climate emergency to energy security, and Alberta is positioned well in that environment. But The Economist definitely was clear the risks are still there. You know, oil price volatility, geopolitical uncertainty, potential recession, Venezuelan heavy crude competing in the US market is interesting. And the one nobody in the room quite knew what to do with, a potential separation referendum that could dampen the investment and housing confidence in ways that are genuinely hard to model. So these aren't reasons to panic, you know, they're reasons to make decisions with a clear head rather than pure optimism. So, you know, just to summarize everything, Calgary's not in a crisis. Job growth, population growth, economic fundamentals that most Canadian cities would envy right now. Alberta leading the country in GDP growth. These things are real. But we are in an adjustment, and adjustments, you know, they're not uniform and they aren't always comfortable. So buying a detached home in Calgary this year is definitely in balanced territory with moderate price softness, a reasonable selection. You know, you're not paying the 2022 prices in a competing frenzy. You have time to think, inspect, negotiate, and in context, it's actually a pretty good place to be because, you know, back in 2022, you couldn't even inspect a home typically. You're just paying conditionless. Now, selling a detached home, price it right, it moves, right? So price it like it's still 2024 and it's going to sit. Buyers are there. The leverage has just shifted slightly and they know it. So condos or apartments, whether buying, selling, or investing, the data is telling a more complicated story. Again, buyers have real leverage, sellers need to be realistic, investors need honest numbers, not optimistic ones. So if you're sitting in Ontario or BC right now and just wondering if Calgary markets make sense, really just the employment here is up over 4%, while it's negative where you are. So there's no land transfer tax in Alberta as well. So you can still buy a detached home in a strong family community here for under $600,000. And the economist who studies this market full time is still predicting and projecting Alberta to lead the country in GDP. So the data is the data. I'm just the guy, you know, who was in the room this week and thought you deserved to hear it straight. So my name is Derek Bryer, licensed real estate advisor here in Calgary with the Justin Haver Real Estate Team with EXP. And if any of this raises questions about your specific situation, whether it's buying, selling, investing, or just trying to figure out if now is the right time, just reach out. Link is in the description. And if this was useful, definitely subscribe and share it with someone if you have somebody that's been asking about the Calgary market and doesn't know where to get a straight answer. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for listening.